And everyone's like, great. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I love this song. I love that you guys know this song. And like, so as we're walking in unison, we're like, here I go again. Dun, dun, dun. So it was just great. It was a beautiful experience.
This is where I blame myself. No. I was so startled that I hit her and she fell to the floor. The look she gave me almost stopped my heart.
It's interesting because Eve's Bayou, I did the table read when I was 10 and I played Eve. And I remember thinking like, oh great, I'm gonna do my first movie. And then I was like, so Miss Casey, I was like, when do we start shooting? And she's like, oh honey, we have to get the money first. I was like, oh okay. So then, called again when I was like 11. I was like, Miss Casey, we're gonna do it now. And she's like, honey, we're still working on the money, And then by the time it came fully back circle, I was 14. And I was like, okay, I have to get Cicely. Like, I have to be Cicely. I remember that when I was 11, I did an episode of On Our Own, which was Journey Smollett's TV show, because she had came off of Full House playing Michelle's best friend, and they gave her a TV show, and her mother was like, hey, if you want to give my child a TV show, you put all her siblings on it. So I did a guest spot on that show, and Jussie Smollett was my very first on-camera kiss. I was 11 and he was 10. So I already knew Journey. So when she came in to test for Eve, it was like there was this ease between us, I think because we both have older sisters and we knew the dynamic of just sistership. Afterwards, like she crushed the audition, and then afterwards, Casey was like, okay, now we just gotta find a Poe, And I was like, I did this show On Our Own, and Journey has a little brother named Jake who's exactly the same age as Poe. And she was like, well, is he an actor? And I was like, yeah. Come to find out, he was actually sitting in the lobby. He was there with Journey. So they auditioned him, and so basically they were all leaving. And I was like, Miss Casey, I'm gonna use the bathroom. And I run all the way outside and I chase their van down the street and I start hitting the window, and Miss Janet, Journey's mom, is like, what's going on? Is everything okay? I was like, yes, I just wanted to tell you that Journey and Jake got it. They got it. So I was like so excited to tell her that she had gotten the role in Jake. And so I remember that vividly, and I remember, just working. It was my first time ever working with a female DP and with a Black female director. There's so many experiences I had from it, but it was a great experience.
This is your pilot, Skeeter, speaking! Please fasten your seatbelts. We may be experiencing a little turbulence. Don't trip!
Cousin Skeeter. So I did Cousin Skeeter right after Eve's Bayou, and I remember just loving the character because she spoke so fast. And when I was younger, I used to watch Blossom, and the character Six, when she would talk really fast. She'd just be like, oh, I have to go here, I have to go to this thing, do you want to get, she'd just talk. And so Nina talked like that. So I already had been practicing it from watching Blossom. When I got it, I just was so excited and had so much fun, and still got to remain a kid. And Robert Richard and I became very close, siblings, and that's kind of where I spent my formative high school years. I did that show. We did the pilot when I was 15 and we wrapped it when I was almost 19. Shaquille O'Neal directed an episode, and that was great. And yeah, it was crazy and fun. I would for sure revive Nina for a special, a 2-hour special, something like that. I did kind of a back in time thing with Nickelodeon, and they brought out the Cousin Skeeter puppet, and I bust out crying. And they were like, why are you crying? I was like, because it was my childhood, It was a really, really big part of my life. To this day, that's the longest standing show that I've been on. So I grew up there,
I have to study.
Come on.
It's just, Eva says that if I stick to a study schedule...
Don't say the E word, okay? Not in this house.
I have to stick to my study schedule, okay? Look, all of us agreed.
What is with you Dandridge women?
I love my sisters.
Deliver Us from Eva, I remember that I was 19. Originally, I had decided I was gonna move out of TV because I didn't want a huge commitment. I wanted to do film, and the writer's strike happened, and so then I was doing this show, Raising Dad, and this audition comes through for Deliver Us from Eva, and so I had to ask permission to go on the audition. And so this particular day, I drove all the way from Santa Clarita in back-to-back traffic to, I wanna say some part of Rosecrans, past Santa Monica. And I auditioned, and I was too young for it. I drove all the way back in back-to-back traffic, and they called me and they said the tape didn't work. So I had to go all the way back in back-to-back traffic and audition again, and then drive all the way home. And then when I found out I had it, they were like, we love you for this. We've been going back and forth because this character's in college and you're only 19 and you look younger, blah, blah, blah. You have braces. The deal was I take out the braces and they would make the character a little bit younger for me. And so that's what we did, and that's when, you know, Gabrielle and I got to work together for the first time, and Essence and Robin and Dwayne and just like that whole cast. And it was a pretty epic experience because I got to work with women who, you know, like when we were doing this whole kind of walking scene where we had to walk in unison, everyone's like, what song should we sing? What song should we sing, you know? And I'm like, what about White Snake? Here we go again. And everyone's like, great. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I love this song. I love that you guys know this song. And like, so as we're walking in unison, we're like, here I go again. Dun, dun, dun. So it was just great. It was a beautiful experience.
There you go. You know what they say, hot chocolate make the pain go away.
Who says that?
Me. Anything that's hot and chocolate, girl, you know you can't go wrong.
As a result of working with Gabrielle, she went to the head of Sony Screen Gems, which at the time was Clint Culpepper, and she said, this girl is amazing. She's like, I love her. Like, you need to work with her. You need to know her. So Clint calls me in and he says, hey, you know, Gabrielle said we need to meet you, blah, blah, blah. You know, here's a few scripts. And so one of them he sent me was Deb's. And of course, I immediately wanted to do that one. And the other one he sent me was You Got Served. And at the time, I was working on My Wife and Kids on Damon Wayne's show. I read the script and I was like, I am too old to be playing Omarion's girlfriend. Like, I'm trying to grow up a little bit. And so I was like, you know, what if I get you the young girl from My Wife and Kids, Jennifer Freeman, because I think she's the right age range and she's wonderful and she hasn't done any film yet, blah, blah, blah. And there was all these issues with her being underage and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, he hired her. And then he was like, great, so you can play Beautiful. And I was like, wait a second, what? And he was like, you can play Beautiful. And I was like, well, I'm already doing Deb's. And he was like, well, it's fine. We'll just have you jump from set to set. And I was like, at the same time? And he was like, yeah. I was like, well, if I had known that I pretty much had to do the movie anyways, then I would have just played the lead. But, you know, but it was wonderful because it was kind of a coming out for Jennifer and her first, you know, feature film, and it did so good. And then me playing Beautiful, for some reason, people really loved it. And it's one of those characters where they often come in and they're like, hey, Beautiful.
I didn't think you were coming.
What do you think you're doing?
Oh, come on, babe. Don't play at being jealous.
I'm not playing at anything.
It was just a show.
Well, I didn't like it.
It's not like I was doing it for real. I was just adding a little flavor. Now, you keep yourself looking this fine, you ain't never gotta worry.
Excuse me?
I remember initially I wasn't gonna go in for it. I was like, I've played the love interest long enough. I just was like really on the fence. And then I really followed Halle Berry a majority of my career. And I thought, well, you know, at this point in her career, she did The Program with Omar Epps, which was like a football movie, you know, it was kind of a college movie. I was like, maybe, you know. I went in and I met Sylvain, who, you know, just in terms of vision and aesthetic, he's phenomenal. And then he's just a phenomenal director across the board. And it was my first time working with Will Packer and Columbus Short, who I've known since I was 10. You know, he grew up in Palmdale, I grew up in Santa Clarita. It's all of 25 minutes from each other. And, you know, Columbus had come from the dance world, and he is a phenomenal, phenomenal dancer and a phenomenal actor as well. Even with being on the fence, I decided to go for it, and I had no idea that would be my second box office #1 movie. I had really had a great time doing it, and I was really proud of Columbus and blown away with what an incredible talent he is.
The bride is here, and I'm running the show. Ladies, now you know. Now you know. Everybody, love!
Think Like a Man 1 was really interesting because I had just decided to be celibate. And so when I got the script and it was this character was deciding to do the 90-day rule and be celibate, I was like, I know exactly where she's living right now. Like in her whole heart and mind, she's like, look, you keep doing it your way. It keeps not ending the way you want it to. If you want a different result, you gotta make a different choice. And she's steadfast in that and just reminding herself of her worth and what she deserves. And if someone won't wait for you, then that's not your person, you know? And so I very much was in that space. I remember just kind of really getting my first like sea legs with comedy, you know, because Tim was like, just go for it. Just try it. Like, it might not work, and it's okay. Like, we'll try something different. Like, we'll figure it out. And it was the first time that I felt safe enough because the director was so great and enough freedom to just go for it. And then I tried these random things, and it worked. And he kept it in the movie. And then you go to the premiere, and you see people laughing at stuff that you made up. And, you know, obviously it builds your confidence. And so there was that. And then part 2 was amazing because it was the first time the cast really got to be in all these scenes together. And we were trying to figure out the whole scene about at the strip club when, you know, Terrence finds out that Regina's at the strip club, and then we run into each other somewhere, and everyone was like losing sleep over like, how do we make this scene work? How do we get them in the same place at the same time? And I remember I was like asleep in the middle of the night, and I was like, well, what if they're in the same strip club? And the guys are like, they're stripping on stage, and the girls are like there to see it, and then like it becomes a brawl. And so I called James Lopez in the middle of the night, and I gave him my pitch, and then I texted my pitch to Clint Culpepper, and by the next day it was in the script, you know? And so it was my idea to have that scene work the way that it did, and so that was really cool, and just everything about that was just amazing.
Ours is a new love, but it burns very brightly. And it gets hot and sweaty and stanky.
Oh man, I remember I was in the movie theater with my sister, and we were huge Anchorman 1 like fanatics, like just saying stuff like, I'm in a glass case of emotion and all that stuff. I remember a preview came on for Anchorman 2, and of course it was one of those previews where it's like, we haven't shot the movie yet, but we're going to type thing. And I was just like, oh my God, I wish I could be in part 2. I got the script when I was filming, and I was working with Catherine Lanasa, who was in, you know, I think it's called Ricky Bobby, or what, the race car one with Will Ferrell. And her husband Grant there was on set, and I was like, I have this audition, and she's like, this is gonna be great. So Grant's gonna film you. She's like, I can do an incredible Will Ferrell impression because I worked with him. So she does this amazing impression where she sounds just like him. We film it in my trailer, in between scenes, on set, send the tape off, and they're like, we love her, let's have her fly to Atlanta to read with Will. And so I'm like, okay. And I'm hearing like all the women who are going out for this, which is like the top of the top of the top women. And I'm like, I have no idea like how I'm in this bunch, but I was like, okay, what can I do that's different? I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go balls to the wall. So when we got into the audition, Linda was like bullying him a little bit, so I pushed him in the audition. I grabbed his hair and pulled his hair, and I took my shoes off and threw them at him, and took my other shoe and beat him with it, and it just was like a really fun audition. They came back, they're like, you got the part. I was like, what? And just being on set with, you know, Steve Carell and Paul Rudd and Will, they are so humble and so kind. Steve is so shy. Will is so respectful. Like, you know, we kind of had our sort of love scene, and he was like, is it okay if I put my hand right here? I'm like, you were totally fine. I was like, you're so good, it's fine. And I remember Christina Applegate coming up to me, and she's like, all right, girl. She's like, it's on you. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, so anything you need, however I can support you. I want to see you win. I want to see you like kill this character. So whatever you need from me, I'm here for it. And I just thought that was so cool, you know?
Guys, I don't believe in violence, but I think we should kick this guy's butt like really hard.
I was telling my ex-husband, I was like, man, I really want to be like in the DC or Marvel universe. And he was like, okay. And I was like, I have faith it's gonna happen. Like, it'll happen in the right timing. And he was like, cool. He's like, well, you have a glass of champagne and a chip in your hand. So what are you doing to bring it to you? And I was like, ooh, I was like, right, I have the faith, but you know, the Bible says faith without works is dead. I was like, where are my works? So from that moment forward, I went and got a trainer. I worked out 5 days a week, an hour and a half a day with Mike T, shout out to Mr. T. And I got this random audition to come in and to be like a 10-year-old. And I was like, oh, this is easy, this is gonna be fun. And so I go into this audition, I have no idea what I'm auditioning for. And then I get a call 2 weeks later. And in the course of that time, I had done a workout video, where in the workout video, it says, believe all things are possible, as I'm working out. And at the very end of the video, in this particular gym, I stand in front of this mural that's all DC comic book characters. And I stand like this with my arms like that. So I get this call, and they're like, you got the job. And I'm like, well, what is the job? Like, what is it? And they're like, it's Shazam. And I was like with the Shaquille O'Neal? And they were like, no, Shazam. I was like Sinbad Shazam? And they were like, no. And so I went and like researched, and I was like, oh my God, this is a DC movie. Like, what the, you know? And then I was like, wait, my goal was I wanted little black girls to see themselves as, you know, comic book characters, and there wasn't a lot of black women in that world. I think at that time that there was Halle Berry as Storm and Tessa Thompson and Thor, and there was really no other black women at all. And so I was just like, I just want a little girl to be able to look up and be like, that can be me, the way that every other little girl sees some type of representation. And I was like, what better way to do that than to actually be a 10-year-old who gets her superhero powers and can be be and do anything. For me, that movie, it's like I manifested it, I brought it to me. And then now to have done part 2, and we're, you know, all throughout the movie, and the character's now 12, and just everything about it is like really, I can't even believe I'm a comic book character. Like, that's one of the coolest things ever.
Figure, you go in wearing a wire.
No. What? No way.
You give Robert Bowers a sob story. See if he invites you to dinner.
Yeah, deception. I was really in a space of, you know, I was really thinking about, should I go back to TV? Because I really wanted to recreate myself and really get out of the space of always playing the love interest. You know, I was like, okay, if I do a TV show, it's got to be a multi-diverse cast. It's got to be something where I can do some drama, but I also want to be able to do some action. You know, I also wanted her to be badass. I had like all these things that I wanted it to be. And then I get, you know, deception gets sent to me, and I'm like, that's everything that I would want it to be. Okay. And I was so terrified of the commitment because I knew like this was, you know, like a 13-episode, hour-long show, which meant 7 months wherever we shot it. Once I got to work, I really loved the character, and I had so much fun. I got to work with my friend Laz, and you know, Wes Brown is like, it's just, I love him to pieces. The whole entire cast, I love Tate and Victor Garber, and Catherine Lanasa, who played the mom, is still one of my closest friends on the planet. We're like really, really sister friends, and here we are, you know, 11 years later. I gained a friend forever from that show.
So we lost Soundhouse when we got her.
What you got is someone who knows how to break artists to new audiences. You guys have Atlanta on lock, right?
They love us.
That's great. But see, for where you want to go, it's going to require so much more. Star, first of all, I loved the show, and I watched it all the time, and I love Queen, and I mean, everybody in that cast, but it was especially special for me because a movie that I produced and co-starred in called A Girl Like Grace, we were looking for this character to play Grace, and we find this young woman who's just absolutely gorgeous, and she's a musician, and you know, she's acted a little bit before but really hadn't done anything, and her name was Ryan Destiny. And I just thought, this is her, this is our Grace. And Ryan had some reservations because the movie was very, very heavy and dealing with a lot of issues, and it had scenes that were, you know, tough. And so, you know, I got on the phone with her and we talked through them, and we, you know, instantly had a bond and a connection. So when we finished that movie, that led to her being in Star. And so for me, Star was just like, you know, my heart just swelled like watching her succeed, and it swells every time I see her, you know, in pictures and shows and, you know, campaigns and everything, and I'm really an advocate for the little girl coming behind me and wanting them not to have to work as hard as I did, and wanting them to have opportunities to shine, and she's a prime example of that. So I have a special place in my heart for this show that I already loved, but her, you know, being one of the leads on it.
Why is everything always about men? What about our dreams? What about what we want?
I think maybe you should go.
You sure?
Holy shit. I think now's a good time to take a little break, don't you?
What's special about Harlem is, you know, I went in and I met with Tracy and Scott, and I left there thinking, you know, I had the job. I was like, I really like this character, like, it's gonna be great. And I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks. And so I call and I'm like, you know, I have my agents call and I'm like, what's the deal, you know? And they're like, oh, they're auditioning people. And I'm like, for Camille? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, they don't quite think you're right for it. And I was like, well, will they let me audition? And they were kind of like, does she really want to audition? And I'm like, no, I totally do. I'm willing to fight for this character. I got on the phone with Tracy briefly, and, you know, I was like, how do you see Camille? And she's like, I really see her with like, you know, like goddess locks, and I see her like this, and I see her like that. And I was like, all right, cool. And then I found out that Grace had been hired and that Jerry had been hired. So the first thing I did was call Grace, and I'm like, Grace. And she's like, don't tell me you're going out for Camille. And I was like, yes. And so we ran lines over FaceTime, and we decided like what we do in the audition. The next thing I did was call Regina Hall and say, hey, Regina, I was like, I think you are the best. And I think you walk the best, beautiful line of comedy and truth and authenticity. And I was like, I would love if you would like run these scenes with me and tell me if you see anything I could do different, or, you know, if there's anything that you want to lend or add. And she was like, I would love to do that for you. I mean, her heart was like so touched. Like it meant a lot to her that I was like, hey, can you help me out? And she just was like so happy to do it and so happy for me. And she was like, trust me, you know? And so We ran the line, she gave me 2 things, and one of them I used for sure in the audition. Then I proceeded to get goddess locks, which takes 11 hours. I sat in the chair for 11 hours and got goddess locks for that audition. And then I went in, and as I'm walking in, I run into Shaniqua, and Shaniqua was like, do you remember me? She was like, 5 years ago when you were working on Minority Report, a mutual friend of mine was doing an arc on your show, and he put us on FaceTime. And I said, I want to do a TV show with you one day. She said, and you and I touched and agreed on the screen and said, in Jesus' name, we're going to do a show together one day. So then we both like bust out crying, and then we're like in the bathroom praying for each other to get the part. Everything came together, and then I didn't hear anything again for another 2 weeks. And then they called me while I was at a meeting, and they were like, you got the part. And I just like bust out crying, because it was like, for me to be in the business for, 30 years at this point, to be able to change somebody's mind says a lot about how long I've been here, and also how much left there is to go. So it's really cool.